Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlickers, shields, death slayers, peasants, vassals, minions, meat sacks. I'm a useful idiot. Welcome. Today I want to talk about Iran being a target of an Israeli attack. So, in addition to this recent story emerging about a Turkish planned false flag event to start an intervention in Syria, and the idea that a military intervention in Syria is still on the table. Now we have stories that continue to show that military attack on Iran is still on the table. And we want to keep this in perspective, though, because in a lot of ways in Israel, certainly as far as Netanyahu has been concerned, an attack on Iran has been on the table for well over 20 years. But now we have recently the Haaretz newspaper in Israel reported that, quote, Netanyahu has ordered the Israeli Defense Forces to prepare for a possible strike on Iran during 2014, unquote. Certainly in anybody else's hands that would be provocative, but we've heard this so many times from Netanyahu it almost sounds lackadaisical. It goes on to say that, quote, to continue readying for a possible independent strike, unquote. And at the same time, the stories emerging that $2.9 billion has been allocated by the Israeli Defense Forces for this task, to just plan for this strike. And but to be fair, $2.9 billion is what the IDF spent on preparing for a strike on Iran. It's the same amount that they allocated in 2013. And of course, they've allocated money, once again, for decades for the possibility of an Iranian strike. So, but now we have Defense Minister Yalon has stated he now supports an Israeli unilateral strike as well. So this has changed the quotient a little bit. And another thing that makes this plan feasible is the U.S. already has a strategic plan from 2006 that includes Israel. So the blueprint for a strike on Iran by Israel already exists, and a blueprint exists so that it would be easy for Israel to start a strike, which would be automatically supported by the United States. And like I say, since the United States already has a blueprint of working strategically with Israel, it would be very easy for the United States to jump in and achieve the goal all along, which is a combined Israeli-American strike of devastating proportions. And this is part of a plan that's been in place since Bush. The idea, and this flourished under Bush, the idea of an initial Israeli strike followed by a U.S. strike. And this was spoken of publicly back during the Bush administration. In fact, in October 2007, Dick Cheney, then speaking to Israeli Defense Minister Barak, said, quote, and the Israelis may decide to act first, unquote. And then he laid out the scenario that the public sentiment would be on their side if the Israelis struck first in Iran and were backed up by the United States. And so this plays in to the fact that Obama has just visited Saudi Arabia, and undoubtedly he's discussed the situation in Syria and Iran. And these are the important agendas for U.S. allies, Israel and Saudi Arabia. Syria and Iran are their main concerns. They certainly don't have any concern with what's going on in the Ukraine, for example, right at this moment. But it's interesting to see that with all the accusations how Iran cannot be trusted, we're clearly seeing that certainly Israel cannot be trusted either. And if I was to bet on who has a happy, itchy trigger finger, it would be Israel, not necessarily Iran. But so here we go. How much credence can we put into this idea that Israel is planning a strike on Iran in 2014? Well, unfortunately, we can never rule out the possibility they would strike, because the fact of the matter is the way it would unfold is you would wake up one morning and hear on the radio and read in the paper that an Israeli strike happened. That's the way these events unfold a lot of times. And we know the rhetoric is getting more heated with Israel, and a lot of these countries, Israel, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia, are all establishing foreign policies that diverge from what the path the United States is on right now. So, and as I always said in all my videos, all these countries in the world are run by psychopaths and sociopaths, and Israel certainly would be at the top of the list there with Mr. Netanyahu in charge. So, although I don't feel like we need to get too excited about this recent discussion of planning for an attack and funding an attack, something that Israel has always done for decades. But the fact is that these are critical times, and we have people in charge that don't always choose the rational path. And, therefore, always good to keep our eyes open to an event like this and discussions like this, and keep it in mind. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.